Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to it. Welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. I'm Allistair McCall. Good to have you with me this week. I'm coming to you from Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's been a good few weeks of traveling. Been on the road. I think I've been in my own bed probably a total of 3 nights in the last 3 weeks. So it feels pretty foreign to be in my own bed, to be honest. But anyway, this week's podcast, it's going to be a short one. It's going to be about process over outcome, and it's something that I see well too often, especially in athletes, especially in athletes who struggle with focus, who struggle with staying in the process, staying in the moment. One of the quotes I love to mention to players is, be so involved in the process that you forget the score. And, let me ask you this question. Have you ever done something, or you've ever watched a movie, or you've ever been involved in a project where you've lost track of time? That is something where you're fully absorbed in what you're doing, you're in the process, you're focusing on what you're doing in that moment, and you lose track of time. You can't believe time has gone so fast. Well, it's probably been something you've been enjoying doing. As a kid, I can remember maybe playing in the backyard and playing sports with my brothers or with friends, and then completely losing track of time and being late to get home, and sprinting home to make it for dinner or whatever it may be. But you were just involved in the process. You weren't worried about the score. You weren't looking at the time. You were just loving what you were doing in that moment. And this is something I try and get across to athletes, is that, when you love something passionately and you just get totally absorbed into it, that is when you're in the process. And I can remember reading an interesting quote or an interesting message on social media once, and it was talking about those athletes that are more involved in the outcome, more involved in the result, are usually athletes that are more involved in the ego in terms of what that result may be. What are people going to think about them if they lose, or what's going to happen to their status, their ranking, their selection, all these type of things. Ego can sometimes get in the way of being in the process, and it's in those moments where you can lose track of what you're doing in that time. And we talk about choking in sport as well, about athletes who choke. What is choking? Choking is like a freeze effect, where you can no longer think clearly. You're worrying about the outcome. What if I lose this? That is where choking comes from, is that you lose the process. Rory McIlroy, in his British Open win a few years back, spoke about just being in the process every single moment. And he had to repeat that word to himself numerous times: process, 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 and not get ahead of himself, not look at the scoreboard. Athletes that tend to look at the scoreboard or are focused on outcomes are the ones that usually tend to choke more, or tend to overthink it, or even worse, think that you're near the finish line and you forget about what you're doing in that moment. But getting back to that quote, it's important that when you love to train and you compete and learn, and you're just you focus on your process as your goal, if I can put it that way, instead of the end point being your goal. And if there's any athletes out there, and I'm sure there is, listening to this podcast, where you find sometimes that you get lost in that process, well, what are some of the things that you can do to help that? Well, self-talk comes into play. You continually keeping yourself engaged with what you're saying. They say don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Because when we go quiet and we listen to ourselves, then those demons and those negative thoughts can start to come in the way, or thinking about past experiences or bad experiences that we've had where we maybe did lose a match or lose a race because we were starting to think of the outcome too early. But staying in the process involves a conscious mindset of continually talking to yourself, continually keeping yourself in the process, and even as simple as something as McElroy has done, and a few other athletes I've worked with, is where they just use that one word, process. Stay in the moment. But funny story. Yesterday I was in one of my favorite coffee shops in Fort Lauderdale called Angelo's, and I was speaking to the server there, and a young girl, probably around about 24, 25. And she was talking about her struggle to get out and exercise and get time to go to the gym. And I said, well, first of all, you make time. You don't try and find time. It's got to become a priority in your life. Health and energy for me are the number one priorities, period. My days are designed around energy and health because that's the foundation. But she was talking about the fact that she doesn't really enjoy exercising, but she needs to. And I said to her, well, when you take that focus away from outcomes, from what your weight is on the scale, or, don't get me wrong here, it's good to have goals, it's good to have numbers or figures or stats that you hold yourself measurable to. But when you're completely focused on the outcome, and you're busy with that every single day, that is where you lose motivation, because you don't see change day to day. You don't see change in your body day to day. If you're going to eat a salad today, are you going to see the difference tomorrow? No. Or a hamburger today? No, you're not going to see the difference tomorrow in your body. But over time, you will see that difference. Jeff Olson talks about it in the book The Slight Edge, is that a year from now you'll see the nutritional choices and the lifestyle that you chose from the previous year in your body. But one of my tips to her, the server at the coffee shop, was think about what it's doing for your mind. Think about what it's doing for the feeling of it, of feeling good. Do you feel great after you exercise? Yes, you do, because you get all those endorphins going. So take the focus away from the result. Take the focus away from the fact that you haven't lost X amount of pounds or kilograms in that certain time, and focus on what it's doing for you mentally, how it's making you feel, how it's making you feel more confident, more positive. Go on feeling, because if we're being controlled by stats and scores and rankings and figures, that's where we lose love of the process. And I find this in junior sports a lot as well, is that a love of the sport is lost because it's overtaken by outcomes and results, instead of just that reason of just enjoying what you're doing, being involved in the process. Again, getting back to that example of, when I was young, is you were just so involved in the love of what you were doing, or so busy or so occupied that you forgot about time. Time stood still. And that's what it means to be involved in the process. Your results will improve when you get back to enjoyment, when you get back to being absorbed in the moment. All those reasons why you first started playing that sport or playing that activity. So if you're an athlete out there and you're someone who's losing the joy or feeling pressured because of outcomes and results, then let me give you this advice: is make your process greater than your outcome. I'll say that again: make your process greater than your outcome. Get back to enjoying the very act of practicing, of competing, of being in that environment. Again, letting go of expectation and just appreciating what you're doing. Don't let outcomes and results take away the joy and love of what you do. Because here's the thing: the more you love what you do, the better you're going to become of it. Because when you love something, you want to do more of it. It's just like when you are in a relationship and you love somebody, you want to see more of that person. The same applies to an activity. The more you love doing that, the more you want to do it. But if you're letting outcomes and results take over the joy of what you're doing, it's going to be tough to motivate yourself. It's going to be tough to enjoy what you love to do. So, you know, another example is that I had a golfer in to see me 2 months ago, and he plays on the Pro Tour. And, you know, he's had a loss of form, and you know, he's saying he feels he's fallen out of love with the sport. And I said, I don't think you've fallen out of love with the sport. I think you've lost what it means to play the game again. And that is the love of actually being out there, practicing, improving yourself, getting better each day, and not being held hostage to the result or the scoreboard on the weekend or what it says on the card. And I said to him, I want you to go out there and I want you to focus on the process of just playing, enjoying the game, and just doing what you can today and being satisfied with that and letting things happen. And I would say in the last 2-3 weeks he's played 2 tournaments, and he's had his best results in over a year by just letting go of outcomes and results, and instead focusing on, you know, that growth mindset of just getting better today. You know, again, be involved in the process of what you're doing. Let go of outcomes and results, because when you're involved in the process and when you're giving that 100%, you're eventually going to see good results and good things come. So guys, that's it for another week. Thanks so much for joining me on the Champion Minded podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed that one, process over outcome. Remember that this podcast is on iTunes. If you've left a rating or review there, I thank you very much. If you haven't, please do so. It's also on YouTube on the Champion Minded channel. Stay connected with me on social media, on Facebook, McCall Method, Twitter, at Allistair McCall, and on Instagram, Be Champion Minded. So that's it. Until next time, I bid you farewell from Cincinnati, and remember, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work.